So it's day 104 of President Trump's 4 to 6 week war in Iran. Overnight, there was a series of tit-for-tat strikes between America and Iran. Is this a descent back into full war? Well, before we get into that, earlier today, President Trump announced that America, in the not too distant future, was going to seize Kharg Island and also a load of other energy infrastructure from Iran. That would be a major escalation if that actually came to pass. What is Kharg Island? Well, the southern part of Kharg Island is where Iran offloads much of its oil. The northern part is actually particularly full of military capability. Now, any operation like this would need boots on the ground. The island is defended. The United States Marine Corps is almost certainly the capability they'd use to invade the island. The trouble is that would carry significant risk of casualties and would inevitably prolong the war. But it does follow on from President Trump saying last night that he was going to strike Iran and strike it hard. Central Command have confirmed that there was a series of strikes overnight, striking mainly targets around the Strait of Hormuz, air defense sites and radar sites. The Iranians also claim that Americans struck water facilities in the region of the Strait of Hormuz as well. According to open source munitions portal, this image, verified by Sky News, shows the remains of a US-made air-delivered bomb found at one of the reservoirs. Now, these reservoirs apparently provide fresh water to 20,000 local residents spread across 10 villages. We have to be very careful here, though. There is a war of narrative going on. We're not entirely sure what the truth of the matter is. Inevitably, it's difficult to see as a military guy why the US would target a reservoir, and it might be an errant bomb. There may be another explanation. We just don't know at this stage. Clearly, though, following the US strikes, the Iranians have retaliated in much the same way as they did the previous night, with strikes against the Al Azraq air base in Jordan, in Kuwait and also Bahrain. And very much like those previous attacks, there's been no reports of casualties and no reports of further damage on the ground. But why are the Iranians targeting Al Azraq air base once again? Well, the Americans have a number of air bases across the Middle East. Part of that is because they need to forward deploy their assets, particularly the fighter jets, because they have relatively short range. The closer you can put them to the enemy territory, the higher the sortie rate that you can achieve. We understand that F-35 fighter jets were actually based at Al Azraq at the time. These are stealthy aeroplanes. They're very difficult to shoot down when they're in the air. Might explain why Iran was trying to hit them on the ground. Now, the Americans put them into hardened aircraft shelters to try and protect them, but whether that was enough remains to be seen. So what is Iran using to target these air bases? Well, the ballistic missiles, the Khyber-Shekron ballistic missile is state-of-the-art for the Iranians, a range of about 1,700 kilometers. That's important because it means that it covers nearly all the US air bases in the region. They're very difficult to shoot down, they're very accurate, and that explains why the Americans put Patriot missile systems on the ground, because that's the best way to defend them. The challenge with the Patriot, it relies on their radar, the Patriot radar, to see these incoming missiles and guide the Patriots on. And that seems to be what the Iranians are targeting. Now, America never admits that Iran has been successful with strikes on any of its air bases, but it is interesting, there's increasing evidence that the Iranians are getting through. And here's an example of the E-3 back in March earlier on this year, based in Saudi Arabia, that was very effectively struck. Why are the Iranians trying to hit the radars? Because if you hit the radars, the American defensive system is less effective, therefore more of your missiles will get through, and therefore you'll be more effective at striking your targets. Might explain why Iran has actually struck Jordan on 2 successive occasions. So where does this leave the conflict? Is this the end of the ceasefire and return to war, or is this just a minor conflagration? What is evident is President Trump's getting increasingly frustrated at his inability to make progress with the talks. He clearly wants to dictate terms to the Iranians, but the Iranians clearly have a lot of leverage now, particularly control of the Strait of Hormuz. However, if Trump was to actually seize Kharg Island, that would be a major escalation. Very difficult to see how talks would progress, but it is worth remembering President Trump often reverts to threats of military action when he feels he's not getting his own way, and particularly if he wants to seize control of the narrative again. That might be what's in play here. But as to the wider prospects of peace talks, well, the events over the last few days do seem to make the prospect of an enduring peace and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz getting increasingly distant.